Hey everybody, Dave here with another Pathfinder rule reminder for you. And today I'm just doing a little follow-up to my previous video on troops. Last week I put out one of my regular how is played videos on the remastered rules for troops, and it generated a lot of interesting conversation and a lot of good questions. And I did realize there was maybe a point or two that in hindsight I wish I had included in that video or made more clear in that video. So I figured I'd just do a rule reminder as a follow-up to address a few of these issues. Since this is following up on that video, I do strongly encourage you to go watch that video first, the How It's Played video about the remastered version of Troops, and then continue on with this video here. I will leave a link to that video in the comments section for you to click on. And a lot of the questions that came up seem to stem from a misunderstanding of how do you target the troops and the segments of the troops with whatever effect, ability, spell, attack, or whatever you want to inflict upon that troop. And so I want to try to clarify that as best I can. So the first thing you need to do is anytime you are going to attack or in any way affect a troop, you need to think, is this a damaging effect or is this a non-damaging effect? And kind of even think of it as two separate tracks in your mind, because the rules of how you target with damaging effects is different than how you would apply the rules for non-damaging effects. So, for example, you're making a melee strike, you're sitting adjacent to the troop, you have a sword, you're going to spend one action to do strike. All you have to do, since this is a damaging effect, the result of it will be damage, is target any single square of the troop as a whole. Doesn't matter what segment you're attacking, you just got to be within range of your attack as normal to any square of the troop, and if you hit, then that damage is going to be applied to the troop as a whole. There's one bucket of hit points for the entire troop. That's a really simple example that I don't think is going to confuse anybody. But then comes up questions of, well, what if I cast a fireball spell? And the fireball's area of effect is so large that it can fit two or more incomplete segments in that blast. So if I'm hitting three segments of the troop, does each segment roll its own individual reflex save? And if they all fail those saves, do I then apply the fireball effect 3 times? And the answer is no. When you are dealing with a damaging effect, fireball deals damage as a damaging effect, then you only have to target one square of the troop, and you only treat the defenses of the troop one time, and you only apply the damage one time for the entire troop. So basically, in most situations when you're talking about doing a damaging effect, you're not going to worry about segments at all. Only for the purposes of determining range and cover and things like that. But by raw, if just one square of the troop is in the range of a fireball, then the fireball is going to have its total normal effect. And if the entire troop is within the range of the fireball, again, it's only going to attack once. There's only going to be one reflex save for the entire troop, and the damage and potential weaknesses to area effects, all that is applied one time. Now, I know that for a lot of people that's counterintuitive, and for a lot of people it's like, hey, look, it doesn't make any sense to apply the whole damage to just cut one little corner, one square on the end. And we'll talk about situations like that in a second. But rules as written, that's how a damaging effect would work. So now let's talk about non-damaging effects. So non-damaging effects are going to potentially apply to specific segments and not to the troop as a whole necessarily. When you are targeting with a non-damaging effect, well, the first thing is any non-damaging effect that only targets a single creature has no effect at all on the troop on troops. Period. So if you have a non-damaging effect, it only targets one person. So, for example, a charm spell that's not heightened, it only targets one person, is not going to have any effect at all on the troop. In order for you to use a non-damaging effect against a troop, it has to be able to either target 5 or more creatures, or you have to be able to fit all 4 squares of a segment in the area effect of that. So if you had like an aura effect, then you were casting Bane, and you had sustained it enough that it expanded. All of an entire segment would have to be within that area for that to have an effect upon it. Now, things get a little bit weird when you start thinking about exactly what those effects are and how they impact things. So I guess the next thing to talk about is going to be the actual text from the rulebook, and I wish I'd included this in the earlier video. I talked about how this is going to be a system where a lot of the decisions are going to be up to the GMs. Like, you're just going to have to make judgment calls. You're going to have to look at the situation and say, I think this makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, and just decide how you're going to apply any of these effects. Because there's so many different variations of so many different conditions and so many different effects and so many different situations of how a troop may be oriented and how a map may be shaped in environmental conditions, that the book really doesn't get into any kind of buy raw calls on conditions and specific effects. Instead, again, they give you rules for targeting, and they leave it up to you to figure out what happens. But this text says, the rules for troops, especially troop defenses, cover many circumstances where it's important that troops are not all one entity. However, the rules can't cover every possibility, and it's best to use common sense. And this is the piece that I wish I had included in my previous video. If a player uses an ability you don't think works on a troop, discuss with that player and refund actions spent based on mistaken assumptions. So the rules are really just saying, like, hey, everybody, players and GMs alike, are going to have to understand that this is going to be up to GM interpretation to a greater degree than what is normal. So try not to, say, oh, you took your hand off the chess piece, you said you were going to do X, and too bad it has no effect and your turn was wasted. Well, that's not fun for players. That's probably not fun for the GM either. So the recommendation, which I think is a good recommendation, is if the players want to do something, they say they take their actions to do something, and then you process it and you decide, you know what, that's not going to have an effect on the troop. Give them back their actions. Let them try again. Make sure everybody's on the same page. So a couple of different things that were put into the comments that might be worth looking at. Can a troop be flanked? Well, okay, so let's think about this. Flanking, if you're imposing flanking, is that going to be a damaging effect or a non-damaging effect? Well, flanking is a non-damaging effect. Now, it could lead to damage by making it easier for an attack, but flanking is a non-damaging effect. So unless you have a ability, a spell, or something that would apply flanking or the off-guard condition to an area or to 5 or more targets, then we fall back on that rule that says that non-damaging effects only target one creature. The troops are immune to those, so it has no effect at all. So in most cases, no, flanking is not going to apply to a troop. What about using your athletic skill to grab somebody? There's nothing in the rules that says that a troop cannot be grabbed or that is immune to the grabbed condition. That's true. But again, what are you using to impose grabbed, which is a non-damaging effect on this troop? Is it like the athletic skill is a single target where you're just literally grabbing somebody? Well, first of all, common sense would say that wouldn't impede an entire troop. But second of all, even in the rules, single target non-damaging effect would have no effect at all on the troop. So no, you can't use grab to use athletics to grab a target. Same thing with tripping someone to knock them prone. But if you had some sort of ability or spell, a quick effect or something that would impose the prone condition on an entire segment, then that could work. And then the question would be, well, what does that do to that segment? So anytime an entire segment faces a non-damaging condition or a non-damaging effect, if that effect would prevent the troop from acting for an entire turn, then you assume that is enough for that segment to be killed. They've been debilitated enough that they would be wiped out by their opposing force. And you lower the hit points to the next threshold to remove one segment from the map, which may or may not be that specific segment depending on the orientation. But so that's easy. If you're talking about effects that are going to slow a target to 3 actions so that they don't act on their next turn, if it's going to completely immobilize them for a turn so they can't freely move and act for an entire turn, that all makes sense. But what about these effects that impose penalties but don't impede the segment from acting? There's nothing in the book that says that effects like that don't work at all, and there's nothing in the text that says they work as normal. So I would say the raw interpretation would be they act as normal, but you are as a GM going to have to figure out exactly what does that mean for a troop. So for example, let's say you cast the fear spell, you heighten it to a high enough rank that it would affect an entire segment. They fail their save, and now they're facing frightened 1 or frightened 2 from that. Now, if they critically fail on something like that and they have to flee, then I would say that they're not acting as normal for an entire turn next turn and fall back on that ruling. But if it's just frightened 1 or frightened 2, they can still take all 3 of their actions. But we're only talking about one segment, so what does this mean for the game? My ruling in a situation like that would be any attacks made by the troop against an enemy that can only be targeted by that segment. If a PC is on the map in such an orientation that they're only in range of the troop through that segment is affected by fear, then I would subtract the appropriate amount of fear 1 or 2 from their attack rolls against that one specific player, but it wouldn't have any effect at all on other players who are in range of other segments that are not affected by fear. Same thing. If a PC is attacking the troop, even though, like I said before, all you gotta do is target one square. Well, if that square happens to belong to a segment that is affected by fear, I would lower their reflex save, their armor class by the appropriate amount for that attack, but not obviously for other attacks that are targeting the troop through other segments, if that makes any sense at all. But again, this is going to have to be something that every GM just reviews the situation and makes their own calls. But the major thing that I wanted to kind of get across that I think people were getting confused in my comments was about damaging effects are targeting the troop. So it doesn't matter how much of the troop is in the area of the attack, it's only going to be one attack roll against their armor class, or it's only going to be one reflex save against your spell DC. No matter if it's 1 square or 16 squares that are within range of that effect and being targeted. It is the non-damaging effects where you have to evaluate it on a segment by segment basis, and each segment is going to manage their saving throws and their defenses individually. And so again, you as the GM, you're going to have to make judgment calls on what then happens. If they are not able to function as normal for an entire round, they're wiped out. Anything short of that, you're going to have to make a judgment call as to how it affects. Now, the other thing that I wanted to share in the first video, and I just forgot, I apologize, is there is a passage in NPC Core. I forget the page number, but I'll put it on the screen some here for you. But there is a special ability that is available to troops called Change Formation. I believe the text says that this is not given by default to all troops of all kinds, but if you have a military-focused troop like a phalanx, then they might have other additional things they can do with this change formation. So I wanted to review these items with you. So change formation costs 2 actions, and it says the troop reconfigures to assume one of the formations below they know. Using this action again ends any previous formation, and the troop can also use this action to revert to its default formation, ending any benefits and drawbacks. So it's going to take 2 actions for the troop to change their formation, and each of these formations includes a benefit and a drawback. So loose, when you do loose, members of the troops fan out to cover more ground. The benefit of this is that any weaknesses that the troop has to area and splash damage are no longer enforced, but the enemy's saving throws against their damaging effects are 1 degree of success better. So they fan out, they cannot be, they do not suffer the additional damages and weaknesses of area effect and splash damage, but because they're not tightly focused and able to coordinate their attacks and focus fire like they previously could, then the players who are going to be making reflex saves most likely against damaging effects from them treat that as 1 success higher. Marching column. The formation traverses long distances more rapidly. The benefit is the troop gains a plus 10-foot circumstance bonus to all of its speeds. The drawback is they suffer a -2 penalty to reflex saves. Turtle shell. The troop interlocks their shields, only available to groups and troops that have shields. And when they do this, they gain a plus 2 circumstance bonus to armor class against ranged attacks and to reflex saves, but the troop moves slower at a -10-foot penalty to all of its speeds. I can see this turtle shell probably being the most common of these formations that I would probably use in my games. It makes a lot of sense. It's very thematic, and it's frankly kind of cool. Then you have the wedge formation. The troop aligns itself behind a powerful commander. The troop chooses an adjacent allied creature without the troop trait to fall in behind. Each time the chosen creature strides, the troop follows as a free action, striding to keep the chosen creature adjacent. Drawback: the troop loses some of their autonomy, they're slowed 1, and cannot voluntarily move away from their leader. So again, another very thematic thing. You have the leader, the commander of the army, and they've got a formation of their troops following behind them, and this makes sense to me. They're losing essentially 1 action on the troop's turn to be able to freely move with their commander. So pretty cool. So again, these are 4 special effects that can be applied to some troops if the GM decides that they are a military-focused troop and are available through the change formation ability. So that is it. I hope I have cleared up some of the thoughts and potential misconceptions about troops in this video. I apologize if I've just made things more confusing, but if you do have questions, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you to all of you folks out there who support me in this channel by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, subscribing to the Patreon, buying a super thanks. I really appreciate everything you folks do to support me. And with that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.